Spokane. This is EvoReal Talks. I'm Jessica Side.
And I'm Matt Side. Welcome back to another episode.
Absolutely. Happy New Year, everybody. We're happy to have
a Happy New Year dance.
Turned the page of 2020 to 2021. Yeah.
And it's so much different, isn't it? Like midnight, I could tell. If you're listening to us on the radio, she is rolling her eyes at me.
I am really rolling my eyes at you. Matt, I'm going to turn it over to you for our featured home.
Some fun stuff. Well, actually, I'm not going to go into our featured home yet.
Okay.
I want to talk about, United Van Lines.
Okay.
Moving company.
Yes.
National moving company.
All right.
They put out a report every single year on the areas that have the greatest influx and outflux. I guess they call it inbound and outbound.
Oh, I like influx and outflux.
I think that's the outflux hung me up. I'm not sure that's a word. So they track data,
okay,
inbound and outbound moves, like where people are moving from and where they're moving to.
Mm-hmm.
And Idaho was named the top moving destination in 2020 by United Van Lines.
Wow.
Idaho had the greatest percentage, 70% of in-migration nationwide last year into Idaho.
Wow.
That is a big number.
That's a national company? Like they're
it's
not
national
just a
company,
Northwest
yes.
company?
No. That's why everybody talks about United Van Lines data, because they're the ones that move people across the country.
Okay.
They're the largest. So people like to, it's more accurate than just like.
Sure. Something is regional.
People local.
Mm-hmm.
So followed by South Carolina, Oregon, and South Dakota, and Arizona, I guess, as well. So, but 70%, the biggest one, they poll their people, like when they do the survey of where they're moving to and from,
Mm-hmm.
and they know that because they're like picking stuff up and taking it places.
Sure.
Lifestyle change and the state's lower cost of living were the two things that they identified as to why people were moving there.
Mm-hmm.
And then the Coeur d'Alene Multiple Listing Service said that people were primarily moving from California, Seattle, and Oregon into Kootenai County.
That's interesting. Because I think of Oregon as being very similar as far as like the beauty of Oregon. And
but it's
more expensive.
It's more expensive. In
Mm-hmm.
general, people are moving from highly dense urban
population
areas
centers
to more rural, not as
right.
dense population areas in the last year. And so most of the people leaving Oregon are probably from Portland. Like if you just look at the population centers of Oregon. So they could have probably said Portland, Seattle, and California, and it would have been just as accurate.
Yeah. California's kind of big too. But
it is. It's very big. In California,
plenty of big cities
people have
there.
been migrating here from California for as long as I can remember.
That is true. I've been hearing at least people complain about it for as long as I can remember.
Sometimes I wonder if it's just people whining.
Well, that too.
Could be. Anyway, congratulations, Idaho. And
we should. This is a moment we should take to.
This is, I'm sure.
That we should take to let people know that we are actually, our office is also licensed in Idaho.
Yeah, Team EvoReal is an Idaho licensed real estate team. So North Idaho, all the way up to San Juan.
So if you do need help in any of those places, let us know.
If you're listening to us in California and you're moving to Idaho, give us a call, 509-62-HOUSE. We'll get you connected.
Yeah, sorry. Anyway.
No, that's a good point. Very good point. All right, now let's talk about our featured home and our featured community, because they coincide. The featured home is actually a condo. It is at 639 North Riverpoint Blvd. It is a 3-bedroom, 3-bath condo. It's 3,412 square feet.
That's big.
That is a huge
For a condo?
For a condo.
Wow.
Kind of a condo townhouse, I think.
Okay.
It is right on the river.
Ooh,
so it's on the south side of the river, I believe, because you look across the river into the Gonzaga University campus.
Okay.
So you can see the steeples and stuff there. The Centennial Trail literally goes right outside your door.
Nice.
You could walk on the Centennial Trail downtown for
cool.
Restaurants
I love it.
And pubs in the park and whatever, right?
Mm-hmm.
So great view, river. It is listed for $895,000, and it really would be perfect. Like, who is this place for? It would be perfect for anyone that's working in the university district. So professors, medical staff at the medical schools.
Sure, because it's so close.
Yeah, any of the administrative staff, those type of individuals, because it is right there. So
wow.
Which leads into our featured community today, which is actually a future featured community.
Okay.
And it is in the University District. So they are in the final preparation pieces, I guess. They're waiting for final approvals for a 300-unit housing development along the north side of the Spokane River. And it is actually
300 unit.
300
okay.
unit. It is actually going to be split in half by the Hamilton Bridge.
Okay.
So it will be like most of us crossing the Hamilton Bridge don't even think about the fact that the river's right underneath us.
Sure.
As we're going across. But those of us that have grown up here in local, kind of where Brown Building Supply used to be, and then the other side over there where Habitat for Humanity used to be, like all of that is being cleared out,
right.
And that's where the development is going to be. It's really we're going to link it on our Facebook page, but the drawings and stuff, conceptual drawings and things look really, really cool.
That's amazing.
Kind of a sleek, dense mixed-use development. It should be able to house 400 people. It will have
400 families.
400.
You said
300
units.
Yeah, 400 people. So they're not going to all be huge number of bedrooms. 4 apartment buildings, including 2 that are going to actually go above, like higher than the bridge. And then the bridge, this is a really cool integration of the bridge, but the bridge is actually going to provide a roof for a covered private space that will have a dog park, a play area, bocce ball, and a volleyball court all underneath, because the buildings are separated on either side, and then there'll be like a common area in between the 2.
This is fun. I really did not know about this. So this is genuinely, I'm like.
Anyway, the proposal, if the proposal makes it over its last few regulatory hurdles, which it's anticipated to do, the work should begin very soon. Lars Gilberts, who's the CEO of the University District, commented that they'll move forward very quickly as soon as that happens.
Wow.
Tell you, I don't know if you've ever heard Lars speak, but he is.
I know you have, and
you've
told me
a couple
about
of times, and if I could ever get him on this radio show, like that'd be a boon right there, talking about the U District. So maybe that's
all we have to do is ask him.
2021 goal for EvoReal Talks is an interview with Lars Gilberts.
That would be, I like it. I'm sure that would be a great.
It'd be a lot of fun.
Yeah, it would be.
Okay. Boy, this is the Matt show at the beginning here.
That's okay. I got my own stuff coming up.
It'll be the Jessica show at the end, so don't worry. Let's talk some numbers.
Okay. I'm excited because I know that you were going to be doing these numbers, and we're going to be comparing 2020 to 2021 a little bit.
Because 2021 hasn't happened yet.
I know. Okay.
Sometimes
she
lives in the future.
All right.
Not very
often. You're going to tell me.
That's an inside joke.
You're going to give me those last
2020 versus 2019. Okay. We're going to compare some year-over-year numbers. Yes. All right, let's start with 2019 to see where we were the year prior. And these are going to be simple numbers.
Okay.
Sold residential single-family condo under an acre. If you remember, those are the stats that we use, and we use them every single week to keep them consistent. You know, a real estate professional can have all sorts of different things in their search criteria, but the important thing is to compare apples to apples, and so that's what we're doing. So sold in 2019, 8,476 units in the Spokane Multiple Listing Service, and primarily in Spokane, but some outlying areas would fall into that. The median sold price in 2019 was $260,000.
Okay. I'm not going to be able to remember these.
That's
you have
right.
to go 2020 to.
Well, I will give you the comparison.
I'll allow it. All
right. Median list price. So I thought this was really interesting. Sold price was $260 even. The median list price was $259.9.
Okay.
So basically the same.
Okay.
And then I pulled the median days on market as well for 2019. You should be able to remember this because it was 19.
Okay.
So 19 days on market. All right, now let's compare it to 2020.
So we got about 8,500 homes at about 260 and 19 days on the market.
Yes, you pass with flying colors.
Thank you very much. Okay, I got this in my head.
Now let's talk 2020.
Okay.
Sold 8,688.
So you're talking like
almost
200
over 200 more units in 2020.
Whoa. Okay.
So this, we mentioned that at the end of the year last year. We were talking about how everybody, there's no inventory. Well, inventory just wasn't sitting around.
Yeah, it was just fast
inventory. It was just moving fast.
Mm-hmm.
So we sold 200 units more, which is a 2.5% increase in sold units year over year.
Wow.
So that's we sold more.
Yes.
So don't let people tell you can't buy a house. You just have to be strategic.
Or that you can't sell a house. So, I guess everyone knows they can sell a house.
God, I can't sell a house in this market, Jessica. If you can't sell a house in this market,
there's something wrong with the house.
Problem. There's some kind of problem. You need to talk to us for sure. Okay, median sold price in 2020, $299,955.
So we're basically like $40,000 higher than the year before.
Yeah, $40,000. Yeah, $40,000. It's 15.4% increase from one year's total to another year's total, and I think that's an interesting. Obviously, we're looking at the whole year and not just like the small snapshots, which are helpful to see trajectory and movement and where those things are going. But 15.4% increase. I thought this was interesting. It's not that big of a difference, but median list price was $295. So, whereas the year prior it was almost exactly the same. And again, it's not a massive increase, but you can just see that is telling that people are putting properties on the market. The buyer pool is so big that it's pushing them up. And I think that's really what's happening is our inventory feels low, but it's just because the buyer demand has increased.
Yeah.
That's what is going on.
I mean, if you look at it, we've sold more houses, which means there are more buyers.
Check this number out.
But here's the other thing I want to say about that, because there are more buyers in 2020. There were more buyers in the market, but I cannot tell you how many people could not find a house in 20 or gave up with their home search. So we could have sold more
if there was more inventory.
Yes.
If there was more stuff to put
Which
out
again is why things like this U district, right?
Yeah. I mean, these are apartments, so that's going to help, but it will help. It
still helps get people into the area. And who knows? A lot of builders are doing apartments and they're building them to condo specifications so that they can eventually sell them as condos.
And
so it's hard to say if that's, I don't know if that's the case here.
I don't know either, but in conversations with like Washington Realtors legislative, like that's a big, housing is a statewide problem.
Yeah.
And our legislators know that. Yeah. And they are looking at, and when the condo laws discourage building of condos or converting apartments into condos, then it makes it harder to have inventory or units for people to live in.
Sure. Okay.
So final number of 2020 that we're going to talk about today, median days on market. So let me just bring us back.
19.
19. It was 2019's days on market. 2020 was 6. So that is a 68% decrease in days on market.
Wow. People fast.
That's the deal. If you're going to get a house, you got to move quick.
Inventory is hot, hot, hot.
Hot. So there you go.
What an amazing transition to what I'm going to talk about today. I didn't even realize this.
Was not even planned.
So I am going to jump right in. And you're going to figure out what I'm talking about as I go. But when Washington was still a territory, it turned into a state. And the year it turned into a state was 1889. And the city of Spokane Falls, which is what we were called at the time, was one of the largest and most successful cities in the territory, and then became a state. Okay? 1889.
1889.
Now,
how big was the territory? Was it the same basic geography of Washington State?
I did not look that up.
If any of our listeners out there, Tina Thorson, have knowledge on that,
and I'm sure that we could easily look it up and find out that information.
It'd be fun to have somebody tell us.
So in 1889, that was a very significant thing that happened, that we became a state. The other very significant thing that happened in Spokane was something called the Great Fire. And
in the same year?
This was the exact same year. This was a fire that started somewhere between Post and Lincoln in an area. So when we first started, just like any other town, right? You are a town of, little wooden structures. Spokane had actually grown to the point where we had a lot of brick structures downtown. Like they had enough fires that they said, well, we really got to do something about this. We want to establish this as a real city. We need to have some, but there was an area downtown that had still a bunch of flimsy wooden structures. So that summer was especially hot and very dry, just like Spokane typically is. It was filled with fires all over the Pacific Northwest. Seattle, Ellensburg, Cheney, Coeur d'Alene had all succumbed to some type of a fire during that year. There was a woman, Adelaide Sutton Gilbert, that had complained in a letter. She lived actually near Coeur d'Alene. She said temperatures had been in the 90s for ever so long. And dense smoke and from fires were all over the Northwest. So,
sounds familiar.
Yeah. So on August
90s.
4th.
Yeah, whatever. What's the 90s? Let's turn your AC up, lady.
Yes, that worked out for them. So on August 4th in 1889, shortly after 6 p.m. in the evening, the fire started in Spokane. Now, a lot of people believe that it took place, or it started in Wolf's Lunchroom and Lodgings opposite the Northern Pacific Depot on Railroad Avenue. So Railroad Avenue is still there, right? We got the condos that are on Railroad. Although that there was some controversy on where it started. So some people, they said that they saw it out of a third-story window of Wolf's lunch counter. The lower part of it was a mixed use. You had a saloon at the bottom, and then it was lodgings at the top. Other people say it was an explosion from a gasoline lamp. Other newspaper accounts, so that was like the Spokane Chronicle had said that those were the things. Other newspaper accounts said it was a grease fire in Wolf's notoriously dirty kitchen. And then others said that it was a cigarette tossed in dry grass. But this is my favorite. A lamp that exploded in an upstairs room had been knocked over by, and I put this in quotes, Irish Kate, fending off a drunken admirer. So there's really no definitive, like, where did it start? Well, yes, where it started, but how it started is kind of like Miss O'Leary's cow in Chicago a little bit. But because of the other fires in the area, like I said, we had started to build a lot of brick properties, but we had that transition area of the old trading post kind of city. But what was happening is the fire was jumping from one building to the next building to the next building. And I found this firsthand account, which I want to read, which is really kind of interesting. It was by a gentleman named Daniel H. Dwight, and he had a business downtown as well as living in Spokane. So here's the quote. It's a little bit of a, so bear with me here.
We're into stories these days on EvoReal Talk.
Before this time, May and I, that's his wife, were downtown, and we hurried down to the block and got the tubs from the grocery store and put one at each window in the Opera House, because that's where his office was, in the Opera House, and filled them with water and stationed a man with a broom at each tub and window to keep the fourth floor window frames wet. I guess they thought that would help. Because what was happening is, and I read this in other accounts, that the fire was jumping and it was getting so hot, it was bursting all of the windows in these buildings, like just spontaneously bursting. May stood bravely by with her broom and water. By the time the flames were down to Sprague Street and spreading rapidly, the chief of the fire department now, and this is interesting, began to blow up the buildings with dynamite ahead of the fire to try and stop it. They were trying to get ahead of it and burn and get rid of the kindling, basically.
Wow.
So they were just dynamiting these buildings. A few minutes more and our glass began to crack, and I had to order May downstairs and out of the building to get her away from danger. With one great burst, the flames jumped through the Opera House windows and also leapt to the roof on the outside. I seized my antique oak desk and dragged it out of his office, for it contained all my receipts and papers. I hauled it down the stairs, but just as I got to the Opera House entrance, the smoke and flames whirled around the corner and swept into the doorway, with which blinding force that I had to let go of everything and run for my life.
Wow.
Right?
That's intense. That could be a movie.
Yeah, it certainly could.
Blowing up buildings before the fire gets you.
Yeah.
Wow.
So the fire raged for 4 hours. It burned the Railroad Avenue, from Railroad Avenue, so you can picture where that is now, to the river. Okay, all the way to the river, and Lincoln to Washington, which is about 30 blocks, 30 square blocks. Some people say 32. It was $5 to $10 million worth of damage, which, of course, I did a little calculator because there's a wonderful place online where you can calculate these things. That's $282 million in today's dollars. But what they know is the only reason they know that's $5 to $10 million is because of the insurance claims. He said there were tons of homes and small businesses that had no insurance whatsoever. Oh, wow. And they didn't carry insurance, so they know that those numbers are higher.
Sure.
The next day, this is so interesting. This heat was so intense that they went to open safes that were downtown, so they were fire safe. When they would open them up, the contents on the inside would just burst into flame.
Because they finally had oxygen?
And it just was so stinking hot. It just, boom. So the banks and stuff like that had opened there. I don't know exactly what was in those safes, but I'm sure it was very upsetting. So they ended up having to wait 4 to 5 days to open the safes so that the contents inside did not burn up.
Jeez.
So only one person died in the fire, which is kind of astonishing. And his name was George I. Davis. And what happened was he leapt from a 2-year-old building, the Arlington Hotel block, when it became engulfed in flames. So he jumped out of the building. He died from burn wounds, so he must have been on fire. And he actually died at Sacred Heart. So Sacred Heart was, established by then, which we've talked about before. We had 2 of the 3 fire department, what they call the hose houses, were lost in the fire.
Wow.
Some say, now this is an interesting controversy that came up at the time, is that the water district's superintendent, Rolla A. Jones, was in Coeur d'Alene at the time. Some people say fishing, some people say hunting, he was just gone for the day. And the guy who was covering for him, they complained and they said he didn't know how to turn up the pumps so that it gave enough water pressure for the hoses.
Oh.
And now they did do investigation and they found that it was actually an equipment failure. So something went wrong with the equipment. And so there are firsthand accounts of the hoses dripping with water, which is really horrendous. Oops. But here's something, and again, there's so many interesting little tidbits when you look into history. The Seattle fire chief happened to be in town when this all happened. And he had, just 2 months earlier in June is when the Great Fire happened in Seattle. It makes me think maybe he was an arsonist.
Well, I've been here before.
But he actually did this wonderful commendation of the Spokane Fire Department, basically saying there was nothing else that they could have done, and that if his Seattle department had worked as well as the Spokane department, that maybe they would have more of a town left. So I thought that was really interesting. There's a whole write-up that
I thought he was going to jump in and be the reason the hoses started working.
No.
Oh, I've done this before, guys.
Yeah, no, but he did. He happened to be there, which is just so unusual.
That is odd.
So up until this time, so I decided to do a little bit of research on the fire department itself. And up until this time, we only had a volunteer fire department. They had carts, and that's when they...
Do you have any idea if that was pretty common in that era?
I think so.
Pretty much just volunteer?
Yes, I think it was very common in that era. I mean, we really didn't have fire departments, he had the buckets that were being passed and things like that.
The bucket brigade?
So they had, they had these large, so if you can imagine, your hose outside, and you get the thing and it winds it up, right? Well, they had these huge versions of that on these big wagon wheels. But at the time, they didn't even have horses in Spokane that were pulling those. You have men that are pushing, they stand on one side and they push those things to where they need to be. So that is what we had. And we had these 2 hose houses with these large hoses on it. And the only reason we even had what we did is because 5 years earlier, in 1884, we established our first viable fire department. And that was because we had developed our waterworks system. So had we not had a waterworks system, it would be the bucket brigade going from the river, right, to these areas, because we didn't even have the ability to hook a hose. What do you hook it into?
Yeah.
So we were very lucky that we had that. And the fire department was largely a fraternity, which I thought was funny because our son is in a fraternity right now. So I know some of the things that are going on there. But they had to be approved through a membership. They had meetings. They even talk about their cute little uniforms that they had.
Did they have to run around the block if they lost certain games?
Stop! I don't want to even talk about that. Thank you very much. So this
shout out to Ethan.
You know, I get interested in something. There's nothing in particular that made me drawn to this other than that, I'd like to learn a little bit about this. But I do feel like I've learned some, I got a few nuggets of information that like are lessons learned. And it reminded me that as a society, we are built on learning from our mistakes, right? So in our next episode, I am going to talk about the aftermath of this and how we rebuilt as a city. And suffice it to say that our ancestors endured some devastating setbacks, but they learned from those, and we are better because of it as a society. Just the fact that the only alarm system, so here's how the alarm system worked in Spokane. A fire station would ring a bell. The churches had to hear that bell, and then they would ring the bell as well. That was part of, and you see that in so many movies and stuff, and I had never really thought about that, but it was kind of their system.
The way their communication.
Right. But
they're all volunteer,
yeah.
And they're not at the station, they're at home, I'm sure.
Yep.
So as soon as they heard all the bells ringing, they're just like, quick, get on the horse and get
That's
downtown.
Right. And so the churches were ringing the bells, and that was our alarm system. And they realized after this that they needed to have a better citywide alarm system. And I also think about, so I'm going back to the fact that the problem with the pumps was that it was an equipment failure. And I think about your dad, because I think about Matt's dad worked at a dam. And what did he do all the time?
He had to do his rounds. Every hour they were checking stuff.
Every hour checking the systems to make sure that they work. And I think about building codes. Why do we have building codes? Why do we have to, in a commercial building, have a sprinkler system? Why? These are all things. These are building blocks of a society. And anyway, I just found that stuff to be fascinating. And you see that, that's where they learned that they needed to do that. At some point, we learned that we needed to figure out a way to have a waterworks system, and those things get us to where we are today, Matthew.
Yeah, well, and that's a good lesson in general, right? Like we talk about bringing it back to U District and what's going on down there. Like they've got certain regulatory hurdles that they're jumping through. And I understand that the builder is like, oh my God. And the contractors and the people that are like waiting for this to happen and the people that want to live in the homes.
Yeah.
But if we don't have regulation, sorry. There is a healthy tension with that, right?
Yes, certainly.
There is a healthy tension there. But without regulation, then we have things like that happen, right? Like if the fire department doesn't run their vehicles on a very rigid schedule to test that everything works, then you've got that problem. If there's not regulations in building codes and building construction, then things burn up more quickly than they ought to burn up, or they fall over, or the Hamilton Bridge is not sufficient to be a roof over your bocce ball field.
That's correct. I was thinking, your dad worked at a dam, and we, know people that are firefighters, and certainly part of their job is just to make sure the equipment works for when it needs to be there. And that's a pretty fun thing. So next week, I am going to get into not only the rebuilding of Spokane, but the emergence of some important figures in Spokane out of that tragedy, and some people that kind of started their ascent into kind of our lore as Spokane. So,
and as far as time of year, we just wished you all a happy new year. And many of you are not thinking about selling your home in January. But I will say this is the most strategic time to have a conversation around preparing your home for sale whenever the right time is for that. So if you've thought about it at all, or you're thinking sometime in the spring or summer you want to sell, reach out to us at 509-62-HOUSE or on our social media channels, or ask at EvoReal.com, and we'd love to help you.
All right. Perfect.
We'll see you next week.
All right. Bye, everybody.
Bye.